Do begin tonight with Wayne County Executive Warren Evans asking for help from the state. The county is trying to dig itself out of a $52 million hole, and although Evans has made moves to reduce the deficit, it appears budget cuts are not enough. Is the next step a consent agreement? That's where we begin our discussion tonight with our MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's always good to see you. And wow, Warren Evans really has it tough. He's got one of the toughest jobs, and now he's saying, you know what, we need some help here.
And it's probably the only tool left to do anything. I mean, he had something like a $55 million budget. He's cut it in half through a series of maneuvers and what have you. But he's got 23 million he needs out of the unions, and those unions are not going to come to the table and say, "Well, okay, you know, I'll give all this up." He's got to have a hammer. He's got to have some leverage, and the consent agreement is a pretty powerful leverage, because the threat there is, if we don't get this worked out ourselves, we'll go into emergency management and all of this stuff will be forced on you.
All right, so how are they going to work this out now, Stephen, once he writes this letter to the state, which he sent out yesterday?
Yeah, well, I think what happens is that the state reviews all the finances and decides whether there is an actual financial emergency, and then they work together to come up with a plan that will satisfy the emergency, that will make it go away. One possibility is that it may be different from the plan that Evans put together for himself. It could be harsher. It could call for more cuts or for more concessions from the unions. And I think that's the idea, is to sort of have that sort of heavy in the background as a possible, you know, threat for unions who might say, look, we don't want to give this up. I mean, this is not a pretty situation for anybody. I mean, there's not people getting, you know, rich off working for Wayne County.
Only if you worked in Bob Ficano's.
Well, right, there were some pensions, there were some big pensions, but those are really the minority. I mean, these are people who are making, you know, livable wages and are going to be asked to sacrifice because the management of the county screwed up for so long, and there's just no more money. I mean, there's no other way to do this stuff at this point than to cut.
Wayne County has an infrastructure it can't afford with its population and its resources. It's got to cut those fixed costs. And you know, the county commission, I believe, voted today or before, you know, after we taped this morning, on the 13th check issue and whether to continue paying that, which was, you know, a clear giveaway to unions by previous administrations. And you know, it's not in a contract, it's not guaranteed, and yet it costs millions of dollars a year. And you know, they couldn't come to an agreement with the union on that. So I suspect they're going to be very difficult. It's
the 13th check is part of their agreement.
Not part of their
it's not guaranteed.
Right.
I mean, there are performance marks that they're supposed to meet
on the performance of the fund.
On the performance of the fund before they start writing them.
Those performance marks.
Part of the problem is the way they measure the performance marks. I mean, and the idea that, you know, 1 year of surplus should mean you write checks. You know, a 13th check, that doesn't make a lot of sense in a pension fund.
Steve, is 35% underfunded. It's only funded at 65%. Right. They shouldn't be writing anything extra. The county, in addition to this $52 million structural deficit, needs $40 million a year just to bolster its pensions. And it'll take 10 years at that level to get anywhere close to fully funded. So I don't know where all this money is going to come from.
Okay, when I hear also consent agreement and intervention from the state, you know, you think of it from a taxpayer standpoint. What is that going to mean for for county services, and how will that affect, you know, daily living for people?
Well, I mean, you know, the county's going to have to start dealing with what are essential services. What are things we have to do, and what are things we just might like to do? I mean, certainly all of the economic development that Bob Ficano was really focused on when he was county executive, I imagine most of that's going to go away. You just can't afford, to do that. You know, the county needs to run the jail. The county needs to fund the prosecutor's office and the courts. Those are the and the sheriff, right? Those are the three. Those are the three things that you have to do, and I am not sure that there's going to be money to do much more.
No, I don't think there'll be money for anything. And if you look at, you mentioned running the jail, that $1.2 million a month going in to support that unfinished jail, and nobody yet has a plan for how to finish this thing. This county is, I would argue, in worse shape financially than Detroit was when it went under emergency management.
All right, we'll see what happens next.